All right. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining today. This is a slide deck. It's kind of a presentation, but I'm very happy to just make this a discussion. And so if you've got questions and things that you want to know more about or things are unclear, like let's have a conversation today. We're going to be talking about how to use Google Optimize to make better experiences for your e-com customers and to be able to measure that they're better experiences. I'm the co-founder of this meetup with Lori. We run a monthly meetup that's virtual. Next month, we're going to be also having a in-person happy hour in Austin. So look for details coming out soon with that information. And in addition to the meetup, I also run an agency called Experiment Zone. We've been in business for over 5 years. Prior to that, I've worked on optimization for Clearhead, including Lululemon, CVS, Steve Madden. So I've kind of been around the block working with different size companies, figuring out how to start and also optimize your optimization program. I'm talking about Google Optimize today. So full disclosure, I was on the Google Optimize team as a UX researcher. I'm not getting any kickback or compensation from them. I just use this tool a lot with our clients and wanted to share some knowledge about it. So what I'll be taking us through today is just the foundations. Like, why do we want to do an A/B test? What is an A/B test? We're going to be talking about how to know what to test. And then we'll take a look at some of the technical setup details, as well as how to get your first test running in Google Optimize. If you haven't heard of Google Optimize before, it's a complement to Google Analytics, which will enable you to be able to show 2 different experiences of the same page to your visitors and measure the impact of that change or those different experiences in the data in analytics. So an A/B test is where we compare 2 versions of the website. Oftentimes people give the example of red button versus blue button. There's a lot more sophisticated things we can do than that, but our goal is to say, what is the difference that we're changing in the page and what's the impact on key things that we want to influence, like more orders or email signups. And we don't want to just test things by implementing them and then hoping that for the next 4 weeks, it looks better than the previous 4 weeks, because it doesn't help us isolate the change itself. We can get all these other influences, like what's going on in the world, what your email marketing strategy might be, any sort of fluctuations that could impact your users' behavior that's broader. And if we can isolate the variable and run the test at the same time, we can really say that single change is impacting this specific conclusion. So it's one of our best tools for really knowing and learning what our customers respond to. Any questions about testing, why we'd want to do that? I'll keep a lookout on the chat too if any questions come through. So here's a visual of what you might see. This is real world A/B testing. So we're actually having 50% of your visitors see one version of your page and 50% see the other version. And then we look at what your order rates are or any other key metrics. And we look at the differences between the 2 variants. And it gives us statistical analysis to have confidence that A was in fact better than B. And therefore we should implement it for everybody. Speaking of being like the big guys, Amazon contributes a lot of their success to doing experiments all the time. They do lots of little ones. They run lots of tests that are very sophisticated. I know Wayfair also has a lot of really sophisticated testing, but you don't have to be as sophisticated as them to be able to use A/B testing to learn and improve your business. It's pretty standard now to be testing any major changes you're making to your site so that you're not just guessing and hoping that it's going to work. This is the way that I like to think about a good testing program. So we want to start not just by jumping right into the tool and moving things around. We want to be very intentional in picking what we're going to test. So we want to think about things that we believe will be high impact, potentially high risk, because it may not work at all. And we want to inform it with other data. So we want to look at our competitors to see what they're doing. We want to look at our analytics to know where the gaps might be. And we want to do user research to know what problems our customers have when they come to our site that keeps them from becoming a customer or purchasing today. Then we move into the testing phase. We want to be thinking about testing as an iterative process. So we want to be thinking about high impact changes that we can learn from and then learning from there and again and again. It's not a one and done test. We want to be learning and building on those learnings over time. We don't want to forget to analyze the data. A lot of companies will look at Google Optimize and say, hey, it's a winner, let's implement it. But what's really great about a free tool like Optimize that's connected to a free tool like Google Analytics is you get a ton of rich data back that can inform your learnings and inform your strategy going forward. So you want to be really intentional about now you've got this data set and taking a close look at it to see what else you can learn from it. And then, of course, we want to implement winning tests and grow our revenue. All right, so the next stage, if you're old school with pen and paper, you might want to grab one now. Otherwise, you can jot some notes down on your computer. But I wanted to make this a little bit more interactive so you could think about your own business. So we're going to generate and design some hypotheses before we even look at the tool. What we want to start with is our business goals. So before we think about red button versus blue button, we need to know what our goals are to grow. So one of the things we want to understand is what do your customers need to do in order for you to achieve your goals, your revenue goals, your AOV goals, number of email signups. We want to isolate what the metrics are and where we are today and where we want to be. After we know our goals, we can move to opportunities, which are either problems that are getting in the way of people getting to that goal, or something that's unrealized, something brand new that represents an opportunity. So we want to think about what does your customer need that they're not getting today? And where do my customers get stuck? Where are the friction points across the customer journey? Is it figuring out what I offer when I land on a page? Or is it really far down the funnel, as in placing a specific order and knowing when it's going to arrive at my house? So it could be any
question for you. How do you know what your customers need? How do you find out what your customers may need or what they may be confused about?
Yeah, there's a rich set of tools we can use to do that. And it kind of depends on how fast do we need to get there? How confident do we need to be in the problem set? My very, very favorite research method is a usability study, which is taking 5 to 10 people who represent your target customer and watching them go through your site. And you identify what your goals are. Hey, I want to make sure they can order a pair of shoes and some socks. And you have them go through structured tasks and see the gaps and questions that come up as they go through those tasks. Some tools to mention in that space, usertesting.com is the big player there. TryMyUI.com and Usability Hub are other ones that can give you access to people who can then go through your site, record themselves going through it, and then you can listen to it and understand some of the issues that they have as they go. That's probably the best way to know what the biggest problems are.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But opportunities can be identified a bunch of ways. So like we've talked to customer support teams to see what kind of feedback or questions they get, or we talk to sales teams to see what's the pitch that they make and does that show up on the site. So there's lots of ways to think about what is missing or what it might be getting in the way based on other data sources that aren't as robust to get to.
By the way, if any of you guys have any questions, you can either raise your hand and we'll call on you, or you can put it in chat and make me the guinea pig. So neither one of us bite. So we would love to see some questions.
Not yet. We haven't seen either of us bite yet.
Yeah.
What was the other, you say Usability Hub, and what was the first site that you mentioned? Yeah,
usertesting.com is more of an enterprise solution. And then TryMyUI.com is a good competitor to them as well, where they'll have participants, they'll have the screen recording. They even have some templates where they'll suggest, here's how you can move participants through the website. And then you'll get an output of, did they pass or fail, what the recording was. And oftentimes you'll add screener questions at the beginning and end, so you'll get the answers in those as well.
Thank you.
Yep. And then we want to make sure we don't start with ideas. It's really fun to come up with ideas, but we don't want to come up with ideas on their own. We always want to anchor them to those goals and then to the opportunity areas. So for example, if the usability study showed that people were really getting lost in our navigation, they couldn't find the socks or the shoes because the navigation was confusing, the ideas we would come up with would address that pain point. So it's not just the red button versus blue on the homepage, but instead, let's test this new navigation title or this new navigation order or this new navigation hierarchy altogether against what we had before. So we want to make sure ideas are really anchored in data and that we're trying to solve something, not just see if it works or not. All right, so here's the exercise for your site. And I want to open this up. So if anyone wants to jump in and be the guinea pig and share for themselves what the goals are, opportunities, and potentially some ideas, I'm happy to also pull up your site and we can all do this together. Any volunteers or anyone have any initial thoughts on these? Anybody have a favorite brand that isn't on this call? We can pick on someone. We can pick on a big brand that we all know.
I'm trying to think of whose site just drove me nuts recently.
Or we can look at a site that's great. You know, there's always opportunities to optimize.
Let's look at Wayfair. You mentioned them earlier. We know they're testing. So
yeah, that's a great question. So we'll go through this exercise together, and I'd love to not just be the one talking about it. So if anyone sees any answers for Wayfair on these, please jump in. So the first question is, who are the customers for Wayfair? Who's their target customer? Or what problem are they solving? What is their offer?
they're really a supermarket for everything you might need for home or office, because they do also have their business division. And these days there's quite a bit of overlap there.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially when you have a home office.
So it looks like they're for people who are trying to furnish or upgrade their space, whether they're renting or buying. They might have different personas for each of those groups.
Probably.
And what do they want them to do?
Spend money.
Find the things that they need or that they want, maybe find inspiration for their space, for design aesthetic, and then ultimately to purchase. Okay, and then what would keep customers from doing that based on what we're seeing on their site?
So I'm noticing a lot of, I don't know if everyone else experiences this, but if I see too many options on a site, it freaks me out. I go in with a purpose, and then if I see so many things that make my eye wander, then I can't make a decision specifically on what to buy. And that usually takes me away from the site, or I even start shopping at other places to see if I can get a better bargain somewhere else. So if I go somewhere and I really am able to easily find exactly what I want, I'm probably more apt to, click through and advance within the site, which is probably what they're seeking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so for me, I've been thinking about getting one of those fun little egg chair swings. So and see if I can find it, right? Let's see what kind of problems creep up. And I think selection may be a challenge for some people. Too much selection can overwhelm you, but also your ability to filter it down. So I've got 20,000 results to go through. If I'm just going to go through this myself as though I'm shopping, but if anyone sees anything in this flow, please jump in. So one of the things I would be looking for is it indoor or outdoor, right? Because that's what these chairs are divided for, one or the other. They've got suitable for indoor, but it doesn't indicate outdoor.
That's hilarious.
Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting one. We already see a problem here. If I definitely want one that works outside, how do I find that? There's like a couple categories here, but I'm getting a little confused already, not really knowing where to go. And I would expect to find it in the same kind of an analogous section of suitable for outdoor.
It should be in the filter section, and those other categories aren't really subcategories, so they're not necessarily related.
Mm-hmm.
Like a hammock isn't the same animal, nor is a kitchen dining chair. So
yeah, so let's say we now have the problem. The problem is I can't filter for outdoor for this particular user journey. So an opportunity is, hey, I want to buy this outdoor egg chair. I can't get to that with the filters right now. So that's the opportunity Wayfair represents. And then Laura, you just naturally went there with the idea of how do we solve it? So Wayfair could then set up an A/B test where they add in indoor outdoor to the filter section or on that other list. There's probably 5 or 10 different ways they could do it. But this is how you would go through this exercise to get to the ideas that will have an impact. Anyone have any questions on that? Make sense? It feels really straightforward, but it's really hard to do in practice because we end up with lots and lots of ideas. And we want to always come back to what are our most important goals, the biggest opportunities, and then score the ideas to make sure they match those goals and those opportunities. So a couple lessons learned. We want to focus on solving problems we know your customers have. We want to start simple in our tests. We don't want to mix up too many variables, so we can't determine, was it the filter addition here or here? Can we separate those into 2 separate tests? And then we always want to make sure we're getting enough data. So for Wayfair, that would be tests for at least 2 weeks. Make sure you reach statistical significance. And we also set up like a certain amount of traffic that we expect to get and make sure we hit that threshold. So there's 3 criteria for enough test information to make decisions on. We really don't want to test just because. Occasionally we do test because the CEO says so. And so occasionally you'll get things like that where a strong idea is coming from somewhere. Those should be far and few between. We really want to focus on the problems. We don't want to act too fast just because something doesn't look good today. We may not have enough data to know that's true or not. We want to get enough to learn from it and avoid complicated ideas. We want to focus on breaking them down and learning and isolating specific variables. And one of the ways that I like to think about defining a test idea is to have this structured approach, the hypothesis statement, where we should change X because of Y. And if we're right, we'll see Z. So the change on Wayfair would be, we should change the first set of filters to include outdoor chair because that's a common sentiment that customers need and they don't have that option today. If we're right, we'll see more purchases overall of egg chairs because people find the right one that they're looking for. All right, so now we have our set of test ideas. We've prioritized them. They're anchored to real problems and real issues our customers have. We've got to now configure and set up the test. So Google Optimize is one of many tools that are in the market. It's a free tool. Google allows you to have 5 tests running at a time, which for most e-com businesses gives you good coverage of all the key moments of the funnel. I like to think of it as run a homepage test, run a collection page test, product page test, cart, and checkout. You've got your 5 right there. And so what you'll do is you'll go to optimize.google.com. You'll create an account. Got some screenshots here, enter a name, agree to the terms and service, and then you'll include a container name, which is usually your website itself, and click create. You already have an Optimize account. Another critical part of this is connecting it to your Google Analytics. So you already have your site tagged with Analytics. So you'll see this splash screen once you've set up your account. You'll go into the settings and you'll click on link to Analytics and you'll enter your property ID and you'll have all that data connected. What this gives you in the future is once the test has run or is running, you'll have an ID in Google Optimize, the experiment ID, and you'll be able to take that and go to Analytics and segment your data based on that. So you can start doing much more sophisticated analysis than what's in Optimize by default. And so I 100% recommend doing this for every test. Any questions about that? And then I've just dropped in some information here about installing Optimize. So the way that Optimize works is it's just like Analytics. You're going to have a snippet that you'll put onto your site. That snippet will allow Google Optimize to inject the code that represents the change. And then your customers will see either experiment version A or experiment version B when they come to your site. So using Google Optimize, the default setup will do client-side testing and enable you very easily to split your experiments and have people see different experiences. And all these questions here lead you to the specific setup. Google Optimize has a bunch of details on their site to help guide you. But essentially it's what's currently working today, how important is synchronous or not, and are you able to edit most of your site? All right, and then for setting up our first test in Optimize, again, you're going to see that same screen here, and you click on that Let's Go button. Google's going to offer you a couple of different options for experiences. I would say for 80% of what you're doing, it's going to be an A/B test. A multivariate test is going to be a more sophisticated statistical way of splitting up the data and the changes that are being made. We generally don't recommend that as a starting place because it can be harder to analyze. A redirect test allows you to plug in two URLs. So maybe you have two different landing pages and you want the same traffic to go to one versus the other. So a redirect is very easy to set up. And that will probably make up about 20% of your test. Personalization allows you to use Google Optimize to manipulate the page for everyone. So it basically is running a test at 100%. And then they also have a banner template if you want to add a template to your top of your page. So really A/B test is the main one you'll want there. And then Optimize will show you this new layout. They have this little grid at the top that will take you through all the steps that you need. You'll click on this blue button, add variant. There's two options there. You can either use the WYSIWYG and drag and drop elements. So for something simple like red button, blue button, you can easily use that editor to change that. When you want to do more sophisticated testing, you can inject HTML and JavaScript to actually make the changes directly. So as you get more complicated tests, you'll need to do more complicated development to support it. Once you've defined the variant or variants that will be in the test, you'll decide who sees the test, which is broken into two buckets. So it's where does the test run on your site? It might be just your homepage, it might be a single product page, or it might be all product pages. So you'll want to plug in what the URL structure would be that should match when you want that change to display or not. And then the second part is who should see it. So audience targeting can be very sophisticated, or it could be as simple as show this only to my desktop visitors. The next decision you'll make is what metrics matter. Here, the objectives that you're setting are going to just show what is going to be in Google Optimize as you're monitoring the test. It does not change what's in Google Analytics. So your objectives can be important here, but it's more important that you think carefully ahead of time about what you expect to see changed so that you're keeping an eye on all the things that could be impacted. We typically look at Google Analytics for all the reporting so we can segment more sophisticated in a more sophisticated way. And then once we've done all these steps, we click start and it's running. So we've got our two variants out there in the world. We'll start to see some information in this reporting tab. It's important that you are seeing visitors in there. So make sure you are getting data flowing through there after you get set up, and then give it at least 2 weeks before you decide to turn it off. Google does try to make some recommendations here of you have enough data or not. There's more sophisticated analysis beyond that I would typically recommend, but it's a good starting place. And that is Google Optimize in a nutshell. What questions do you guys have? Is anyone using Google Optimize right now?
Have any of you ever done an A/B test? Or one of the fun ones that's fun on Amazon is when you catch them and it's clearly an A/B test. Has that happened either?
Yeah, we periodically run A/B tests. I know for our company in particular, I'm running A/B tests on not our website, but some of our HubSpot emails. But the value in running these tests is amazing because it gives you data-based insight with regard to what your prospects are actually responding to versus what we think or hope they're responding to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think an A/B test is one of the best ways to resolve when I think a lot of companies, we end up spending a lot of time discussing what the solution should be. So like I've sat in so many meetings where we spend an hour debating what the right solution is. And as soon as you can apply an A/B test, like why not both? Let's see which of the two works in the real world. It makes the conversation go away. It's just a much clearer way to make a decision.
It's
Yeah,
also
and I
a
would
great
say-
way to handle your boss. Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Chris.
Oh, no, go ahead.
You know, we did that, you know, where your boss comes up with a crazy idea and you really don't want to tell him that's lunacy. So you just say, we'll test it. And the reality is sometimes your boss is correct. So that's why you test and you don't just assume is that sometimes the way you think something's going to work is the opposite, you know, so Chris?
Oh, I was gonna say, I think the the key to effective A/B testing is making sure that you only pick one variable to test. Because AJ, I think you mentioned that earlier when you try to test a variety of different things, you can't really tell what affected that final outcome, and then you're kind of back to square one.
Yeah, what I often see is there's this notion that whatever we're designing is definitely going to win. So why not put more into it? Like, why not advance the product page design, like a couple more steps, just roll it all in. And then when the test loses, which happens because we're actually measuring it, we have no idea what to do with the information. All we know is that something in there was severe enough that it hurt it. And so I approach it either one of two ways. One is if you were an Amazon in the world and had a ton of traffic, you would only test micro changes. Like each individual change would have its own test. For companies where we're making kind of a trade-off in time and investment to run the test, I like to group changes that are on the same topic. So we might make a few changes to the product images and we'll know that it's either a better product image experience or not, but it won't tell us like which specific variable in the images was better. But what we definitely don't want to do is change the images, change the like review experience, change the button placement, change the price, and just guess and hope overall it worked out. Because it could be 3 of the 4 worked out, but the 4th one actually dragged it down. So it could be a 20% lift instead of a 50% lift.
I have a question for you,
Mhm.
AJ. A/B testing's I mean, for what we do is definitely at the core of our optimization process. And I confess I'm fairly new to the industry, so this is a great learning experience for me. But I'm really curious to know when you do see results, what's the kind of increase or change that you're looking for where you can resolutely say this did have an effect, whether it was positive or negative? Like I imagine that even minute changes are, can be cause for keeping something either the way it is or making the modification. So in your experience, having worked with a lot of different clients and businesses and business sizes, what's requisite for saying we're gonna maintain this change, that these are in fact results that are positive, where in fact it could just kind of be anomalous, or it can be something totally unrelated.
Right, or it could be noisy data, right? Because in the first 2 or 3 days of an experiment, we might get really noisy data that will continue to fluctuate as we get more data in there to enrich and really increase the confidence in it. One of the things I like to think about is if we were academics, we would be able to make one tiny change and run the experiment as long as it takes, and we would definitely see a change. It just might be like 0.000001%, and we could get to statistical confidence with enough time and enough data. What we don't care about when we're running a business is changes that change things on our site 0.00001. So what we want to do is set a respectable amount that we want to be able to detect. So let's say like a 1% or a 5% or a 20% lift, depending on your traffic and other trade-offs. And we want to know, okay, how do we know with confidence that we've had a 20% lift in the data? It's not just noise. So we want to use statistical methods to say, hey, we're at 95% confidence that this did change at least 5%. And that helps us understand, we do work upfront to determine how much traffic we'll need to know whether or not we hit that threshold. So there's a lot more details I could go into on that, but it's going to depend on how big the change is and how much traffic you have for what's going to be a good trade-off for the business, for either sitting around and waiting for years and years to get the answer, or, hey, we've got 2 weeks, let's go for really big swings and try to make rapid change to the site. Does that help?
It does, yes, thank you.
Who came up with the test idea for their business or their client's business? Anybody come up with anything?
Yeah, I'm gonna test pop-ups because we have a subscriber pop-up, so I want to see kind of maybe different words, maybe different images might make one more effective in converting into emails. So that's one we'll definitely take a stab at. And
Another variable is triggers, like how long it takes for that to open is another
Right.
one. And then how many fields are on those can have a big influence. So if we keep it simple and get right to it, usually that performs better, but not always.
and
Also,
what oh, I'm sorry, just one other question,
Oh.
just to follow up. What would you say, what amount is statistically significant for an online A/B test?
It's going to depend on how big the change is, right? So that if we double something, it's easier to detect. So the number of like visits we need through to see a 100 or 500% lift is much smaller than the number of visitors we need to see like a 1% lift. So all the testing tools out there, except for Optimize, have these calculators where you can do some like napkin, back of the napkin type math to say how many visitors will I need. It is an art rather than a science to know how much the change could impact it, because it could very well be we think it's going to be 50% and it's 5%. So we just won't know, or we might end up with a home run test based on something that we didn't think would have a big impact. So that's where the art comes in versus the science of the stats.
Thank you.
how do you know exactly what to measure as your primary goals? Let's using the email as an example, because that's, I think, easy to understand. Maybe changing the pop-ups timing gets you more email subscriptions, but of those subscribers, what percentage are actually becoming customers? In other words, we're trying to make a quality assessment. How do you do that? Something like that.
Yeah, so for an email pop-up, I think the way I would think about A/B testing that, our goal is to get more email signups, but the action closest to the email, so like the change that's being made, is either filling out the form or submitting the form. So that's already 3 metrics. We want to know, firstly, are they starting to fill the form? Secondly, did they actually submit? And then third, did we capture their email? And that because capturing email can happen anywhere on the site. So if we've now gotten their email on the pop-up, but we would have gotten it at some format somewhere else on the site, we've traded off for that. So we want to know overall email signups. And then we want to keep an eye on other variables that could be negatively impacted by the test or positively, right? So we want to know, did having this email pop-up disrupt people's journey to buying today? So we would add orders into that. We might want to know how many people are closing out this pop-up and how much is that changing versus before. So anything that you're curious about becomes more of a story metric to make sure, hey, do we understand the overall implications of this test versus those 3 KPIs that are closest to the change that will help you understand, should we go forward with this or not? So for any test, you can kind of break it down that way.
Awesome.
Any other questions, thoughts? Who's going to install Google Optimize today or this week? Anybody feeling inspired now? Got one hand raised. That's good. That's success for me. We got 2. Okay.
And then everybody in black is really going, me.
They're all doing it right now. That's why their cameras are off. Great. Well, I think we can just end early and give people some time back today. I'm happy to stay on if anyone has any specific questions about their situations. And then for those of you here in Austin, we're looking at September 1st for an in-person happy hour, probably like 5 or 6 p.m. So we'll get that event posted shortly. But thank you all for being on today and for all your great questions. Look forward to seeing you at a future event.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.